And we are back. Okay, thank you for rejoining me. Okay, picking up at the middle of page 50, we're talking about dementia. When we're addressing someone, we want to use a friendly tone and avoid raising your voice. Be kind, be smiling, stay positive, present a friendly demeanor, have a good bedside manner, as they call it. Talk slowly and clearly. Again, we're not going to be, what we call dumbing it down or infantizing our speech, but we can slow our speech down so it's easier to understand. Because a lot of us are used to talking quickly. Ask yes or no questions when appropriate and give them time to respond. Or if they have questions about your questions, let them ask away. The person may not understand everything that's said, but it's important to preserve their dignity or self-esteem. So, yeah, there will be times when they don't really get what you're saying, but they'll get the gist of it. They'll understand the core concept of what you're saying. Maybe you'll explain something, and what they'll hear are the words, now, shower, bedtime. And they're going to kind of put the pieces together from that and go, okay, it's time to take our shower before we go to bed. Meanwhile, you just spoke about 8 sentences. They heard now, shower, bedtime. So, as long as you're speaking slowly and clearly and emphasizing words, I always try to do this. I don't know if you've noticed in the training, but I emphasize words that I like to make sure that you guys are picking up on. And so emphasize words that have importance to the subject of the conversation. Make sure the environment is quiet, comfortable, and calm. We talked about removing distractions and things like that. So those are some helpful tips to working with folks with dementia. Now, on to the next section, traumatic brain injury. Okay, that's at the top of page 50. An injury to the brain can affect communication skills. No two brain injuries are the same because our brain is fearfully and wonderfully made, isn't it, folks? Our brain is an amazing piece of machinery. I don't know how it works. I don't even have the beginning of the notion of how that brain functions and does everything it does. It's an incredibly created piece of machinery. I call it machinery, but you know what I mean. The most common difficulty for individuals with a brain injury is social communication. Why do you think that is? Why do you think social communication is so hard? It's because it requires a back and forth component with a built-in time limit. If you're texting somebody, that's communication, right? But you've got time to think, time to respond, time to go back and correct mistakes or change what you said, review the text, then you send the text message, right? But in a conversation with somebody, it doesn't work like that. It's not like an email or something. You have to go back and forth, and when someone says, are you ready to do this? They're expecting you to answer in the affirmative or the negative or the so-so. And so people who have trouble following a conversation or coming up with rapid responses can feel intimidated by even the most basic conversations, especially if it's with people they care for or respect, whose opinions of them matter. So keep that in mind as well. This can also lead to problems forming and maintaining relationships and effectively communicating with caregivers and other members of the care team. If you're feeling no confidence in communicating with somebody, then you're a lot less likely to go out into the community and meet people. You're going through the line at the grocery store and you see the cashier and she says, hey, how is your day going? And if you don't feel comfortable with communication, maybe you have trouble saying, oh, I'm having a nice day. How about you? Maybe you just kind of shake your head and, or just go fine, and you shut down that communication. Now, are you going to form a meaningful relationship with the cashier at the Winco station? No, you're probably not. But it is a social interaction that is beneficial and healthy. And as we said before, especially with people who don't get out that much or can't get out at all, every social interaction they have has value and is important, especially the ones with you, because you're their caregiver. So they need to have good social interaction with you. So always remember, never, over expect. Don't overestimate what they're capable of until you see what their baseline is. Now, some tips you can use to help with people who have traumatic brain injuries. Communicate clearly. This is very similar to the dementia one. They may not understand body language and facial expressions, so describe feelings for them directly and clearly. Give them time to think and to organize their thoughts, because it may take them longer to come up with whatever it is that they are trying to say, or process what you said and come up with an appropriate response. Make sure the message has been understood. Encourage them to ask questions for clarifications. Remember, we talked about faking it, talked about saying, oh, yeah, I got it, but they don't got it. And sometimes we talk about you doing that too, just, sure, yeah, that's what she said. But especially with people to whom making sure they understand is important, you want to make sure they understood what you said because it's important. Some survivors of traumatic brain injury have trouble taking turns in a conversation. They'll interrupt, they'll talk over. You get and say they got in a car accident, right? And they hurt their brain. And now when they have a conversation with their wife will say something and they'll just start talking. Meanwhile, their wife is talking. And the wife will be like, I was talking. Can you let me finish what I was saying? And they're like, blah, 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 because, well, is it their fault? I mean, no, they had an accident. They had a brain injury. But can it still be frustrating for the people around them? Of course it can. Absolutely. It's hard to deal with social missteps. It's hard to deal with people that interrupt, that talk over you, that don't know appropriate communication techniques, the appropriate volume to use, appropriate topics of conversation. It can lead to awkward situations. If you're in the middle of the store and your client tugs on your arm and says in a very loud voice, I have to poop. And you're like, okay, let's get you to a bathroom, should you feel awkward and embarrassed? No, it shouldn't affect anything at all because who really cares what people think about you or your caregiver or your client or whatever? But of course, we do feel those things. We do feel that way because we're human. Just expect that to occur. Make sure you understand their message and make sure that they repeat themselves. Make sure that you ask them to repeat themselves if you didn't understand. Now, some survivors may have difficulty using nonverbal communication, like, hand gestures, facial expressions, again, tones of voice or pitch or cadence. They may be unaware how their physical actions affect others. They may have a tendency to grab when they talk, or they may have a tendency to get in real close when they talk to you. And they don't understand the bubble. They don't understand the boundaries. They don't understand, your own personal space. And that'll happen sometimes with clients with traumatic brain injury and other ailments as well. So that's something that can be common. So I wouldn't say you'd want to rely on body language. Most of the time, it's better to directly ask them in simple terms, the yes or no questions, one-word answers, what they're feeling or why they're feeling it. Politely ask them to change their physical behavior if necessary. Okay? Many times they just need a reminder. They're not doing it to bother you or hurt you or they don't know, and they don't know unless someone tells them. I liken it to maybe someone who has a nervous tic, right? And they're just tapping on the desk constantly, and they don't know they're doing it. And maybe you say, "Hey, would you mind not tapping on that desk? I'm trying to concentrate." And they go, "Oh shoot, was I doing that? I'm sorry." They didn't know they were doing it. It was just an unconscious thing. But, you can just politely point it out. And most of the time, unless they can't understand even the most basic of directions, they will stop the behavior and realize, oh, this person's not comfortable with me 3 inches from their face. Maybe I'll back up a little bit. Okay, that being said, let's move on to page 51, onto disabilities. Now, this is a very broad term, of course, because a disability can be a very wide spectrum of things. But a disability is basically any condition of the body or the mind that requires modification or assistance for certain activities. There's lots of disabilities, and each person's experience and needs that come from this disability will be unique. You want to treat this person as you would any other adult. Don't be afraid to ask questions of when you're unsure of what to do. Just be yourself. Use a normal tone of voice and body gestures. Relax. Don't be embarrassed if you use common expressions like, do you want to take a walk? Or I wish you could have seen it. That might relate to a person's disability. Okay? You get what I'm saying? They're in a wheelchair and you say, do you want to go take a walk? So it's like, but sometimes that'll happen. Sometimes you'll sort of like say those things completely harmless without intention. All right? So think about some common expressions and things that maybe you would use in day-to-day life that might actually be awkward when working with someone with disabilities. Take a little break. We'll come right back. Okay, thanks for coming back. Now, continuing on about talking about disabilities, please don't talk down to a person with disabilities. Gauge the pace, complexity, and vocabulary of the speech according to theirs. Again, examples. I liken it to if you're jogging with a friend, right? And your friend, maybe they're not used to jogging and they can't quite keep the pace that you keep. Well, do you just go ahead and run ahead of them and then later go, man, why couldn't you keep up with me? Or do you match their pace, keep encouraging them to watch as they improve, and then maybe later you guys can go a little bit faster, right? It's kind of like that, but with conversation. You match the pace of the person that you're with and the understanding level and the level of complexity of dialogue. And you can gradually increase your tiers there if you want to improve and see them improve. Remember, a lot of these people that you're going to be working with, they haven't had a lot of people in their life to be supportive to them. They may have had a great teacher, they may have had wonderful parents, but they need so much more support than you might. Maybe you were a self-starter. Maybe you did everything yourself. You were a voracious reader, went to the library. You watched documentaries on things. You watch YouTube how-to videos on stuff. You learn all kinds of stuff. No one has to prompt you to do it. You just want to do it because you're interested in the world. Well, a lot of times people who are living with a disability, they're at a disadvantage and they don't have access to those things, or they don't even know those things exist. They might not know that you can watch YouTube videos that teach you how to tie your shoes or whatever, things like that. And so you being there to be a leader, to be sort of like the pathfinder, and to help to guide them and teach them is very beneficial to them. So take every advantage you get, take every opportunity you get when you're working with people with disabilities to find areas that maybe they're weakest and help them to become stronger in those areas. And little by little in increments, you'll see that you can. Nobody in this world exists that can't improve in some way. We all can improve at something, okay? Everybody can get better at something. No matter how bad you are at it, you can get better at it, okay? So it just depends on the work you're willing to put in. If you have trouble understanding, again, don't pretend to understand. Ask them to repeat what they said. And if you still can't understand it, maybe find another method of understanding it, like writing it down, drawing a picture, just something. But make sure that you understand what they're saying, because what they're saying could be important. It could be relevant, and it could come up in later conversations. And if you say, oh yeah, I understand that, and tomorrow they ask you a question that has to do with what they talked about yesterday, and you're like, what are you talking about? They're going to know that you don't know what you're talking about and that you don't understand. Don't assume because someone has a disability that they need help in a certain area. Because like I said, everybody is good at things and everybody's not good at things. So just because someone has a disability and you work with someone who had that same disability doesn't mean the limitations of the person you're working with now has the same limitations as the person you worked with before. The disability does not define the person. Okay? It's simply one aspect of their personality or their physical makeup. So remember, you don't want to assume anything. Always get to know them and what they need specifically. The fastest way to find out if they need help is just to ask them, right? And if they do want help, ask how before you act. Don't just assume they need it done completely for them. You always want to encourage them to do as much as they can to the limits to which they can aspire to. Okay? Always do the best they can with using the tools at their disposal. Now, speak and ask questions directly to the person with the disability. Don't talk to another person about them while they're sitting right there. Okay? That's, again, one thing we talked about before. Be mindful of the person's disability. Remember, we talked about person-first language, and we would say a person with a disability rather than that disabled person or that wheelchair lady or that Alzheimer's guy. You know what I mean? Person-first language. And if a conversation will last for more than a few minutes and the person needs to sit or use a wheelchair, then, sit down with them. Get down to their eye level, kneel down, but be at their level. Communicate with them. Communicate with them as an equal, not as a superior, okay? In the old times, the kings would have high thrones. The pharaohs would sit way above the people, and because height has always been in some form or fashion within the human anthropological makeup a symbol of power and authority and superiority. The tall ones, the high ones, they always get the best and the most and the strongest and the most beautiful and the most money and the most opportunity. It's just It's just for some reason everything, the taller that you are, or the higher you sit in the chair, or the higher your floor is on the building even, says something about you and your social standing. And so that's been something that's been going on forever. It's not just a new thing with oh, tall is cool. That's been around forever. Okay. And that's something that can be translated directly into caregiving, is you don't want to be towering over your client and making them feel inferior to you. You get down to their level and you make them feel as an equal to you. Then they feel more comfortable expressing themselves. Now, over to the next section, working with interpreters. Home care aides may need to communicate with the client through an interpreter. Maybe they can't hear, and they actually need to use American Sign Language to communicate, and you need a sign language interpreter for communication. It may be another language that they speak and you don't. Obviously you can communicate non-verbally using context clues, but when you want to get a complex topic across to someone, it's better to have an interpreter to make sure they really truly understand what's going on. Now, if you have an interpreter and you're working with them, then some things are especially true. One, speak in a normal tone and volume. There's no need to overemphasize or put a lot of nonverbal communication on your conversation when talking to an interpreter, because they're going to be interpreting words, okay? Just words. They're going to say what you're saying verbatim. That's their job, not to put their own spin on it, not to overemphasize things, not to say, oh, well, this is kind of what they said. No, if you have an interpreter, your job is to say what was said exactly, okay? It's a big, it's like the Hippocratic Oath for doctors, but it's for interpreters, right? Speak in short phrases and pause to give the interpreter time to interpret and the person to respond, right? Speak directly to the client. You don't have to look at the interpreter when you're talking. You'll look at the client and talk to them as normal, but the interpreter will do the actual speaking to the client so they understand. Don't ask the interpreter, how is she doing? Or what does she want for breakfast? Their job isn't to just ask questions of the person. Their job is to interpret your questions. And look at the client. Let's say, talk about that. Acknowledge your client with your body language. So, just have normal communication there. Now, over to page 52. Here's our last page. And look, we're all done with this module. Isn't this great? So in summary, impairments to hearing and other body functions can make verbal and nonverbal communication more difficult. And as a caregiver, it's your responsibility to know and document the policies in your setting and be effective using communication. You can maximize your connections with the individuals you care about, and everybody deserves to be communicated with clearly, don't they? So that's a pretty good module. That's probably one of our longer modules that we did, but it's also one that's really relevant to the job you're doing, because anybody can move a person from here to there, or move an arm up and down, or put a spoon in someone's mouth. But the psychosocial aspect of it, the common care aspect, the friendliness, the professionalism, the bedside manner, the attitude, those are things that have to come from within. And knowing what's expected of you helps you to get right and get your right in your headspace before you walk in the door to be a caregiver. Now, what I want you to do is go ahead and when you're done with this video, when we're all done and the video ends, down here at the checkpoint, I want you to answer these questions in the checkpoint, okay? In your own words, using the knowledge that you acquired in lecture, answer these questions, and then in class, we're going to discuss your answers. Over here at the module review on page 53, this is the quiz, okay? Now, yes, the answers are at the bottom of the quiz. Why did they do this? I don't know, but these aren't pass or fail. These are, what do you really know? So I advise you to not look at the answers and just answer the questions as best as you can, because we're assessing at this point. We want to know what's stuck and what needs to be reinforced. So just answer the questions without cheating and looking at the answers. And in class, we'll discuss these questions and answers and make sure that, if it's false and you're like, but why is it false? We're here to explain that. So, okay, it's been great going with you through this module 3. You can go ahead and jump off the video now, and I will see you guys back for module 4. Bye.